North Korean hackers have been indicted by the Department of Justice in their plot to rob banks to the tune of $1.3 billion. And they're also tied to the Sony Pictures hack of 2014, to Lazarus Group, to APT 38, and to WannaCry. So you bet that I want to talk about them today. Microsoft estimates that thousands of developers have been involved in the SolarWinds ongoing story. This is a long tail, long game story that may change the way that CISOs have to think about things. So, lots of things to look at here. I'm Steve Prentice, and this is our week in review. These are just two of the stories that I and my colleagues at the daily Cybersecurity Headlines podcast bring to you every morning in our 6-minute podcast. But now we have the opportunity to get some insight and some opinion and some expertise from an expert that we all know and love. He is the co-host for the CISO Vendor Relationship podcast. And we are happy to welcome to the show today, Mike Johnson. So, Mike, welcome.
Thank you, Steve. Love the applause. I mean, this fabulous audience, and I'm excited to be here today. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a great pleasure, and of course, on your other show, you have to always prove that you actually exist, but we can see you, so we know you're here, or a really good deep fake version of you. So either way, we're really happy to have you share your expertise on a few things here. The first one, then, let's just go with this lead story. We've got some progress, basically, in this one of the most infamous stories that, again, keeps on going in terms of North Korea perhaps funding a lot of its general revenue from this kind of cybercrime. I don't really have a question here, but it does seem to be at least a good step forward, perhaps, in getting some of these bad guys, perhaps. But does it also reveal, perhaps, that there's a lot more of this going on that we have to watch for?
What I think is interesting about when they charge someone, they're never going to arrest these people. These people are never going to end up in jail anywhere. But all of the work that goes into bringing the charges against a direct individual, we know it was this person. That's what's interesting about this. We've seen it with Russian state actors. We've seen it with Chinese state actors in the past. I think maybe even some Iranians. So I really think that's an interesting aspect when they're posting these arrest warrants is they really have a level of attribution that they're comfortable with moving forward. So I think that's what's interesting about these stories.
It is interesting to just see that the wheels keep on turning in the background. So it's something to watch. I think we haven't heard the last of this by any means, or there'll be other
Definitely
stories
not.
like this. By the way, I just want to remind you and the audience as well that our session today is being brought to you by Kenna Security, and I'll be speaking about them and one of their new products coming up shortly. And if you are joining us live right now, consider joining also on Crowdcast, where you can join the conversation and share some comments as we go through these stories with Mike. So looking at the next story that we were bringing up on the news, I'm not sure which day we did this, but I have a particular love for cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. I've been following it for years. So this was rather interesting to observe that Jack Dorsey, Mr. Twitter, and Jay-Z together are planning to invest 500 Bitcoin to try and make Bitcoin the currency of the world. This is worth, well, it was worth 23 million when we posted the story. It's probably worth more than that now, into a trust that is intended to develop basically develop business in Africa and India as the places to actually develop this. So we know that a world currency is not viable, but is this an interesting approach? Is this a viable approach to generating more business in the cryptocurrency world on the good side of things?
I'm skeptical about cryptocurrency and have been for a while. Where I think the issue is, it comes down to how sovereign nations think about cryptocurrencies. They're not going to want to surrender control over currency by embracing one of these cryptocurrencies. And I think that's the issue that they're always going to have a hard time getting over. And trying to make it an internet currency, it's interesting, but I can't imagine the United States or China or any of the main economies of the world embracing cryptocurrency in a way that makes it anything other than an additional currency that you can move money between, but it's not the standard currency. It just seems like it's always going to be over there on the side.
Yeah, perhaps it'll do a better job in just legitimizing blockchain as a a fundamental component of the trustless economy. So rather than focusing on the currency, maybe this will help blockchain grow into something a little bit more strong and robust. So let's look at the next story then, which is about Microsoft. Um, Again, looking at the story that never ends, the gift that keeps on giving. SolarWinds. Uh, it's now there was a great blog that Microsoft put out, which is talking about where this came from and the tale going back in time, which is far longer than just last year. Uh, Thousands of developers, incredibly sophisticated developers, but implanting tests, very subtle tests with very long turnaround times, waiting 3 or 4 weeks or months before it actually pings out to a DNS or whichever way that it was set up to message out. A very long, careful, and studied approach to routing into the system. So is this going to be the future in terms of this kind of insidious long game? And what should CISOs do to perhaps modify their approach, or are they on track with this currently?
I think we will see more of these. This isn't the first time that we've seen this style attack. Uh, this manifests itself back into earlier attacks, and I can't believe I just blanked on the one that went into the Iranian centrifuges.
Stuxnet.
Uh, Stuxnet, thank you. Stuxnet had a very
Yeah.
similar concept, which
Yep.
was uh, there was air gaps, so you had to wait. Uh, the only way that you could get into it was actually breaking into the supply chain, which was the systems that they used to write the code that went into the centrifuges. And it's similar types of attacks which that they did with Orion, different actors obviously, but with Orion it was break into the IDEs that the developers were using to write code for Orion and then implant that way and then wait and see how it went.
Yes.
So we'll see more of it because we've now seen it at least twice. It's probably happened more than twice, but I think it will remain a rarity because the vast majority of attacks that we see today are more around criminals. They're criminal industries who want to get their money and get it fast.
Right. Right.
Ransomware is the prime example of that. I think we'll just see more ransomware, more quick in and out kinds of attacks. That's what will continue. But when there's a significant target, when there's something that a nation state really, really wants to go after, they have the time. That's the P in APT, right? Persistent.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's something that your average attacker doesn't have the time to wait. And I also think that's one of the challenges that CISOs face in dealing with these types of attacks is you're up against an adversary who essentially has unlimited time, unlimited resources. There's no way that you can really stand up to that if one of those nation states decides that they're coming after you. So you're really looking at how am I detecting this? You're not. It's almost impossible to prevent when they
Yes,
really
it
want
is.
to get you.
And it's
But
it,
if you can detect it and respond, you have a chance.
and I think that the Stuxnet story should be required reading for anybody who wants to sort of
Yes.
observe how this was done and deployed. So again, this is the ongoing sophistication of a war that is happening beneath our feet. So to bring things back around to something a little bit more local, LastPass, which is one of the best known password management applications, is now sort of taking some of the free ride away that people have to choose as of March 16th which device they want to use their free LastPass app on, whether it be their PC, laptop, or their phone. And anything else that needs to be protected by it has to move to the premium service, which isn't that expensive. Now, I mean, this is, of course, business. It's sort of an extension of the freemium concept. But I guess my concern is more about it's still a bit of a tough sell for a lot of people to use password managers. There's a trust issue, especially with regards to generated passwords that people can't even really memorize at all and see. They're giving that trust over to an app. So, do you think this might in any way backfire by making putting up another perceptual wall of acceptance between end users? not IT people, but just your average end user, because now it's going to cost?
I think that is a big concern. We put so much effort into convincing folks to use password managers, and we've been able to say, hey, go use this free one, and it's actually really good. It's not just a free one because it's terrible. It's a quality app that is free,
Yeah,
and the on ramp to that was just so easy as a result. And I do worry that it's that people are going to now have this barrier that even if it's just $3 a month,
yeah,
I personally pay for LastPass Premium. I also pay for 1Password. I use multiple password managers, and I do believe in the value that password managers that they bring, but not everyone does. And you're now creating just that smallest barrier. Or I never had to put in a credit card. Now I have to put in a credit card.
right. Yeah,
It could be $1, it could be
yeah,
50 cents. I don't think it's the amount that's the issue. It's the fact that people now have this additional barrier to adoption that we may end up with people reusing passwords again. And I think
right.
that's a bad outcome.
Yeah, so it's the perception thing. Ian Pointer a moment ago just said it's hard to argue against monetization, and absolutely, that's why we're in business. I mean, the good product has been field tested for years. It's hard to argue about wanting to get the appropriate monetization for that
Yep.
product. But once again, the acceptance factor of something that is this intermediary, I love it. I've been using it for years. I trust it fully, but it's still a big perceptual leap for people. So we shall see how that goes. I'm just going to take a moment, Mike, to acknowledge our sponsor here, and our sponsor for this episode is Kenna Securities. So if you are ready to shift gears to a risk-based vulnerability management program or system, now is the time. Through Kenna Securities' new on-demand educational series called Kenna Catalyst, you can learn the 6 steps you're needed to start your own risk-based vulnerability. Give me 1 second here. Uh, it's a program that makes the vulnerability management system just more manageable. So you can earn, by the way, 1 CPE credit through ISC Squared while you're doing this, and you can learn more at kennasecurity.com/catalyst with a K. So we thank them for their sponsorship today. And going back now to the stories, this one is sort of disturbing to me in a way because we're talking about, again, entry level technology that people are using in their homes, but misconfigured baby monitors that are allowing for unauthorized viewing of children in their bedrooms and daycare centers, but also seniors as well, wherever these kind of monitoring systems are being used. There are certain brands that supply to the end brand makers that are now misconfiguring basically the real-time streaming protocol. And worse than that, the data detectives that found this also noticed that IP cameras are being repackaged as baby monitors. And this is quite a disturbing thing. David Sparks mentioning that when he had a baby monitor, you could tune in to see other people just by happenstance, without even intending to do so. So once again, from the sort of surface level end consumers viewpoint, this is still happening. It's disturbing. It's the kind of thing you don't want to see happening, especially if it is companies, organizations repackaging unsellable cameras for this regard. So your thoughts about that, Mike?
It's really it's something that's been going on for so long, where we've had IP cameras showing up on the internet, people being able to view into other folks' homes, and this kind of goes back to the beginning of when we had these kinds of cameras, when people were being sold security cameras, and it it's amazing to me that it continues. Like to this day, 10 years, 15 years later, this still remains an issue. And I think
Yeah,
some of it is these really cheap cameras. They don't care. They
yes,
have no interest in putting any effort into security. They're just trying to make a quick buck. And then you've got consumers on the other side wanting to save money, which I totally get. I understand the incentive of Why would I pay $100 for a camera when I can get one for 25
Right. Yes.
and it looks exactly the same? But the flip side is you're there's got to be a trade-off, right? I mean, we've been told so long, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is, and this is really one of those areas. I think the only thing that people can do is pay attention to where you're getting your camera from, recognize that you're putting your own privacy at risk. You're putting the privacy of potentially your children at risk by saving a few bucks.
Yeah.
Uh,
I
save
thought that
save your money somewhere else to invest in a decent camera.
this is one of these things that I like to refer to as digital literacy. The capacity for the end users to just be aware of the fact that this kind of thing has to be watched and second guessed at every instance. It's
Yep.
really fun to get a digital doorbell as a present or something like that, but just slapping it on and making it run without thinking about the tedious password management or just coordinating the security in the home, yeah, it's tedious, and people are so prone to forget that. But somehow it just drives home the point a lot more seriously when kids are involved, because this is just not right. So again, I guess the message here is, as IT people, as CISOs, we've got family, we've got friends, we've got clients and customers, just to spread the word about the ongoing need for awareness, sophistication on an end user level, digital literacy, perhaps. So let's turn for a moment to Australia. Australia has unliked Facebook. They're unfriending them perhaps right now. There's a big deal going on with regards to the ability to put news out, and Facebook is actually blocking users from viewing or sharing Australian news. Australian publishers cannot post content to their pages. So we've got here an interesting thing. You may say this is just purely business, but at the same time, it looks like a bit of a slippery slope concept. We've got a bit of victory, really, I think, for the media tycoons in that area, like Murdoch and the Packer family. But is this a sort of a thin edge of the wedge here, that we're looking more at regulating where and how people can get their news, or how they're monetizing the news from sources? It just seems that there's a bit of a clash of ideas between the social media, Facebook type programs, and what we consider news. Where do you think we're going with this?
This one to me seems like a game of chicken, honestly. You've got, the Australian government on one side really throwing down this law that basically targets Facebook directly. It
Hmm.
targets Facebook, it targets Google very directly. And you've got on the other side, you've got Facebook saying, "Okay, well, let's go. Let's have this out." I think what Facebook is worried about, and I'm kind of echoing what others who are way smarter than me have said, is that if Australia passes this law and Facebook agrees to it, every other country is going to implement the same law. And I
Right.
think that's what Facebook is really worried about. And that's what they're fighting against, is that future potential for where things are going to go. And, so I think that's the story here, is not so much Australia. It's
Yeah.
not so much a story about Australia, but a story about Facebook,
Yes.
and how Facebook is expecting it's going to have to interact with the rest of the world.
Yeah, it is exactly that, sort of a leading edge of the wedge in terms of how other organizations and companies will handle this. Well, you know what? And hearing my dot matrix printer roaring away in the background, and what's that telling me? That's telling me that we're in the lightning round right now. We've only got a few minutes left in our show, and so we've got a couple more stories that I just want to cover really quickly, because yes, indeed, we're running out of time. The next one is the hacker that claims to have stolen from Jones Day, a firm that is connected to the Trump campaign and administration, or Trump campaign. Jones Day said there was huge amounts of data that had been lost, but they say that this is internal. That their own systems were not compromised, but this was a file sharing company that had. And this has been confirmed independently as well. This was a file sharing company. But to me, this is like saying, well, my car has been stolen, but it was stolen from the parking lot at Walmart, so it's kind of Walmart's problem. Do you see any sort of mutual responsibility here, or is it appropriate to keep this at arm's length? Because the data is still out there. That's the problem.
So James Jones Day had the business arrangement with this file sharing company. That this was someone they had engaged with. I mean, this is kind of like the supply chain problem, right? So their usage they do bear some responsibility for the fact that they chose this sharing company. They put their data there. Uh, I don't have all the full details about how the compromise happened, but it's possible that Jones Day may have even misconfigured something to make this happen. So I don't see how Jones Day can completely wash their hands of it and say, "Yep, not our fault." Um, it's their data, so
It is. It's again, it's easy to deflect perhaps, but I think this is a serious issue for them to just because the data is out there. The Dutch police are basically telling hackers not to bother dealing with Holland anymore, with the Netherlands. They apparently successfully dismantled an Emotet botnet and have posted social media comments now basically saying to other hackers, don't bother trying to do this here, you will be caught. I think that's rather fun. I mean, it's got some serious underpinnings, of course, but they're trying to play the game of saying, we can find you, we will do you, we will get you. So do you think that don't bother warnings would be effective? Or is this going to be kind of like the same, like the cardboard cutout of the police officer in the road trying to get traffic to slow down? You'll get used to it after a while. Is this going to
no,
work for people or not?
well, it'll be interesting to see because the Dutch have been very aggressive at going against cyber criminals. They've proven that they will take things down, that they will arrest people, that they will dismantle infrastructure, and this is kind of a way of just of them boasting about it and trying to, get out there and yeah, we've done this, and we're going to boast even more about it to remind you. So I, it'll be interesting to see what it looks like in the future. And it's big words, it's bold words that they've backed up. So some of the cyber criminals might actually listen to it.
Well, that's cool. I mean, if Holland, if the Dutch are indeed a model to follow, then that's a great thing to be aware of. Last question, and then we got to wrap it up here. Windows and Linux servers have been targeted by a new Watchdog botnet, which is basically taking on or making space for crypto mining botnets that want to, basically use the technology. This is called Watchdog, which is again is just a good thing to hear, and was discovered by Unit 42, which is a unit of Palo Alto Networks. Here's my sole question for you. Again, crypto mining is an energy intensive process. Honestly, is it not that difficult to find and discover when these things have been implanted? Because it just seems to be, like trying to create meth in the basement. You're gonna see stuff coming out of the windows. Is it not obvious when there's mining going on?
So it's a good comparison. Like if you're driving down the street with an infrared camera, the meth producing houses are going to, really brighten up. But you have to actually be driving down the street and looking. And
Yeah.
uh, if you look at AWS's security features, GCP, a lot of them actually have stuff specifically for detecting your CPU utilization ramping up because of a crypto miner. So the cloud infrastructure has this kind of monitoring that's looking for this because it's a big deal. It's really a problem where a cloud account gets compromised, all these infrastructure gets spun up and starts mining. Um, so I think as long as you're looking for it, it's blatantly obvious.
Right. That's what you're looking
But
for.
if you're not looking for it, you won't find it until you get your bill at the end of the month.
Right, exactly. Yikes. Okay, well, this is great. We're running long, and so we've covered these things really well, Mike. I really appreciate your insight here. So, is there any of these that is your favorite story, one that intrigues you and your instincts?
So I actually really like the Dutch story.
Hmm.
It's really kind of cool to see a law enforcement organization who has that track record actually going out there and saying we're warning you. So that they're willing to put those bold words out there and willing to see where it goes. So that was a really cool story.
Good. Oh, that's fantastic. Well, so where would you like people to find you, Mike? And I mean, what's the best place for them to follow you?
Best place to find me is at CISOseries.com. Got a weekly podcast, the CISO Security Vendor Relationship Podcast. Just recorded an episode earlier today, and we've got many more stories, uh, many more episodes to come ahead of us. Um, so a lot around the corner. So check us out, CISOseries.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm around.
Good.
So thank you for having me, Steve. This was a lot of fun.
Oh, great. No, it's a pleasure. And it's great to just simply learn your wisdom. It's just a wonderful thing. So thank you as well for being here. So we will hear you on the next podcast next Tuesday as well. So thank you once again. And Mike, I'll see you again soon. Um, Basically, as we wrap up here, I want to say also that learning like this is an ongoing process. So I invite you to consider joining us all again tomorrow for the Friday video chat. We're talking, the topic will be about hacking cloud vulnerabilities. So this is a great way to learn some more stuff and to meet some more great people in the speed dating, speed networking event that happens directly after the conversation. I want to thank our sponsor for today, which is Kenna Security, once again. And also, finally, just remind you that you can find me and Rich Straffolino and Lisa Voss reading the news every day in the 6 Minute Headlines podcast. And you can get that through CISOseries.com or wherever else you get your podcasts. We will be back next week, of course. And until that time, I want to say thank you once again for being here. I'm Steve Prentice. Stay safe, and we'll see you then. Take care. Bye bye.
Cybersecurity headlines are available every weekday. Head to CISOseries.com for the full stories behind the headlines.